Hey everyone, Clay here. I just wanted to take a brief moment to do some super quick housekeeping before the start of this episode. First things first, we are officially in the holiday season, so Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, if anyone actually celebrates Kwanzaa. Does anyone actually celebrate Kwanzaa? It doesn't matter, because whatever your winter holiday of choice is, Anthony and I would like to say, happy that to you. On that note, Anthony and I also want to say that we really love Christmas, and in particular, we really like spending Christmas with our family instead of working on a silly podcast. So for that reason, we will only be releasing 2 episodes this month. This one, and then we'll do one more next week with a really cool guest named Rob Henderson. If you haven't heard of him, look him up. He's great. Look forward to that one. And then you can expect us back in action second week of January. We'll take off the first week for New Year's, and then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. So yeah, you shouldn't be listening to our silly podcast anyway. You should be spending time with your family, so you shouldn't be missing anything. But the second piece of housekeeping is I wanted to humbly request of all of you, please, if you have not already, rate and review us on iTunes. It takes 5 seconds. It's free, and it's a super huge help to this podcast. It's the best way to support us right now. The other best way to support us is to please subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a like, leave us a comment if you feel so inclined. These little things that take a couple seconds out of your day make a big difference for us. So it would be super, super helpful. Consider it a Christmas gift to us, or a Hanukkah present, or a Kwanzaa present, or whatever it is. It would mean a lot to us. So yeah, please like, subscribe, rate, review, follow us, all that good stuff. We're going to have all the necessary links in the bio. It'll take you to our link tree, and then you'll be able to find everything there. Anyway, I'm done rambling. Again, happy holidays, and please enjoy this episode of Discourse Lab.
This is Discourse Lab.
MAGA in Trump 2.0 is a cultural phenomenon.
I'm Anthony Rispo.
And I am Clayton Smith.
Is this the moment where I let you know that I think your therapist is incompetent or inadequate for you?
On this podcast, you'll hear a wide range of perspectives from an ideologically diverse suite of guests.
Social psychologists will just seamlessly import leftist ideology.
It's quite a radical idea, actually, to say that we're going to deregulate banking and take government out of all of these spheres of life in which it was previously involved.
Our goal? To use conversation to analyze ideas, test arguments, and question dogmas.
Terrorist speech, extremist speech, disinformation, misinformation, all of these concepts are inherently irreducibly subjective.
Now, let's head into the lab. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Discourse Lab. We have 2 very special guests for you today. That's right, we've got another double guest episode coming on the heels of our last and first double guest episode. So it'll be a fun one. Our first guest is a returning guest, and that is Nikos Mohammadi. And then we also have Desai, who is a first-time guest, but he's a good friend. We've talked with him before, and it's great to get him on the pod. So you guys hopefully are already familiar with Nikos, but I'm gonna give you a brief overview. Nikos, you are a sophomore still, right?
Sophomore, yeah.
Sophomore at Columbia College, and what are you studying?
American Studies.
American Studies.
Which I like telling everyone is a made-up major, so I'm having a blast. It's great.
Studying his made-up fake major, American Studies. He's also a writer. You can read him in Real Clear Politics. Where else, Nikos? Where can people find you?
You can find me in Unheard. You can find me in Sublation. You can find me in the Sundial, which is Columbia's heterodox ideas magazine. So
all great publications. We will link to some examples in the show notes. And welcome onto the pod for the first time. Is also a Columbia student. And what are you studying,
I'm a sophomore at Columbia College studying political science and economics.
Nice. 2 very much not made up majors. So you got one.
My tuition dollars are going to good use.
Good contrast here. Yeah.
I hope so.
I make fun of Nikos. Well, to be fair, Nikos, you made fun of yourself a little bit. But I will say, I actually also majored in political science like and minored in film studies. So, another kind of made up major, or minor, I should say.
Well, I mean, when you major in psychology, it's like people you're either taken seriously or people hate on you. So
there you go. Right. But I will say I took an Intro to American Studies class in my last semester at Columbia and actually thought to myself, damn, I should have majored in this. It is a very interesting subject matter because it does sort of combine history, literature, philosophy, politics all into one kind of major that just centers all of those things in the United States. So I think it's kind of cool. So maybe you're being a little too hard on yourself, Nikos.
Well, yeah, and a great team of faculty as well at Columbia.
Yeah.
That was a very big reason for me to major in it. Actually, part of it is that you only have to take 9 courses. It's very multidisciplinary. So it is very interesting actually as a fake major. But and then also, despite being a fake major, it does actually have a very impressive team of faculty. Professor Jeremy Dauber, who's the new head of the department, is excellent. For example, I took his class last semester. I had a class with Mark Lilla this semester, another excellent professor.
You love Mark Lilla.
So yeah, very, very cool people on board.
Yeah. Well, now that we've gotten, is there anything I missed in your bios? Anyone want to bring anything else up?
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't do my sort of extracurriculars.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. So on campus, I'm the president of CODA, the Columbia Open Discourse Alliance, and currently there's a bit of a feud going on between Sundial and the publication that I write for, which is the Columbia Political Review, which I'm a senior editor for. But that's something we can certainly get into on the podcast as well.
Oh, we should. Yeah,
that would be fun.
Yeah, I know. A lot of good stuff. And I'm also a board member for the Hindu Students Organization on campus. You can find me in Spec, Sundial interviews, Columbia admissions reels sometimes. I don't know. Just really whatever your heart desires.
Great. And again, we will link to some of Ohm's stuff in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. If you guys hadn't already surmised, the topic of this episode is largely going to be Columbia. Obviously, Columbia was the subject of a lot of media attention in the last few years for the protests that were going on, some of the things the Trump administration was trying to do with, accusations of anti-Semitism and discrimination and all these things. And so really what we were hoping, one of the things we were hoping to do with Ohm and Nikos is to kind of just get a sense of what Columbia is like for the students this semester, now that things seem to have quieted down. And then on top of that, we also want to very much talk about CODA, the Columbia Open Discourse Alliance, which I sort of was my brainchild that I came up with my last semester there, and then realized I can't do anything with this. So I sort of gave it to Ohm and Nikos and those students to sort of hopefully take and run with. And I think they have, and they've been doing a good job. So we're going to get into that as well. And then there's a couple other things we want to touch on, but it's going to be very much a Columbia episode. All right. So with the intro out of the way, why don't we get into the first kind of topic that we wanted to cover, which is, I want to know from both of you what it's like being a Columbia student this semester, because like I mentioned before, there was all of this, hubbub around campus, and we were all there for that, and there were the protests and all this controversy and blah, 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 blah. But things seem to be a little bit quieter this semester. Is that true? Is it quiet like it appears to be? And if so, what is that like for you guys and your friends?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know Nikos was talking about that a little bit before we officially hopped on. I think right now, just because of the deal with the Trump administration and sort of the various rules sort of around the settlement as it relates to protests, time, place, and manner restrictions, certain definitions, as well as just sort of the general fatigue that comes with 2 years of being, in the national spotlight, being in the news literally every single day in one major media outlet or the other. I think now there is certainly there's certainly a much more quiet atmosphere. It feels sort of like you can be a day-to-day student without sort of constantly being in this defining moment in history and having to sort of consider that as you walk to class every day, even compared to last year, because obviously Nikos and I came in in the semester after the encampments and everything, where there was still a good amount of protests, and we are obviously here during all of the initial wave of the Trump stuff. So certainly now, right, it's much more quiet. But even in that, there is definitely sort of this quiet apprehension of sort of like worrying about what comes next, because obviously there is this agreement in place with the Trump administration, and so a lot of students are sort of worried about sort of what it would mean in practice, like what is the settlement going to look like, how are these cuts going to materialize, like what is going to be the state of these policies as they sort of get established with like different offices and stuff. And so right now it's really just in a state of limbo, if I had to describe it succinctly.
Yeah, and to agree with a lot of what echoed or said there, I pretty much agree. Again, I'm talking obviously not in my capacity as a vice president of CODA, but just as an individual. This is something that I wrote about for Unheard, actually, which is that I basically went back and I said, look, I've been very vocal about, for example, my opposition to the attempted deportation of Mahmoud Khalil. I've been very vocal about my opposition to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, just because I think it's not a correct definition of anti-Semitism. However, I do also think that if I am to be intellectually honest, I do need to look back at the past semester and at how positive it's all been. So there's no longer protests on campus. There's no longer all of this chaos. There's occasionally like very small protests happening outside the university gates on Broadway and 116th. But aside from that, there has really been a newfound sense of tranquility. And it's actually really only in that sense of there being peace on campus that you can actually have the flourishing of open discourse and people feeling like they're able to approach one another and converse and express different ideas without the threat of violence or retribution or ad hominem attacks. So yes, standing on principle, do I disagree with some of the Trump administration's methods? Sure. I have a principled opposition to that. But overall, am I, worried or am I mad at the result? No, because ultimately I do think that Trump saved Columbia in many ways.
Yeah,
Well,
and just to echo sort of something that Nikos said, which I think is important that I forgot to bring up, is that, like Nikos said, we are speaking in individual capacities because CODA is obviously an alliance of many groups from across the ideological spectrum. And so we certainly don't want this to seem like we're taking any sort of positions. These are entirely sort of our personal opinions. That way we can speak honestly and freely as well.
Yes, this is
So-
us as individuals.
So, Nikos, you seem to attribute the attenuation of the chaos or how it's diminished a bit to Trump's moves on the university with threats of defunding and also punishment for anti-Semitism. And you didn't quite say that part, but I'm injecting that part. Are there any other attributes, any other reasons why there has been such a change, a shift, anything internally?
Well, one thing that we could obviously also point to is the fact that there is now a ceasefire in Gaza.
Okay.
The degree
Right.
to which that ceasefire has held, the degree to which there have been skirmishes, obviously this is all up for debate. But there is, I think that any person looking at the situation in Israel, Gaza today versus looking at the situation 6 months before, I think any person has to admit that the situation is far better today. Just in terms of the amount of Palestinians that are being murdered.
Right.
Well, okay, I don't want to use murdered. That was a charged term. But, the amount of Palestinians that are being killed or the Israeli hostages who are now thankfully back home, I think that everyone can look at that and see that it's a better situation. But the interesting thing is that throughout all of September and a bit of October, that ceasefire was not in place. So the war in Gaza was still waging on. But during that time period, we didn't see any protests on campus. We didn't really see any of this radical behavior that is corrosive to open discourse. Even on October 7th, there wasn't really much going around on campus. There was one small protest outside the university gates. students passed around a pamphlet titled "The Columbia Intifada," stuff like this, but there wasn't any major crazy demonstration on campus. And so, yeah, I think all of that can be attributed to Trump. It can be attributed to the settlement agreement with the university. It can be attributed to the new rules. It can be attributed to, I'll be honest, this is a part of it, but the sense of fear that a lot of international students might have about potentially getting deported and apprehended. And
I mean, well,
also the IHRA definition as well, which would be violated at really any of these protests if one student gets up and starts saying, whatever, Israel is a Nazi state or Israel is a genocidal state. That can very easily become an IHRA violation where if students are echoing that chant, everyone is implicated.
I
Anyway.
see. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
I certainly agree with you, Nikos, that that definition that rubs me the wrong way, right? Because I very much
Mhm.
disagree with the idea that Israel is a genocidal state or a Nazi state. I think that calling it a Nazi state is particularly heinous. But the fact that people could get punished for voicing that opinion definitely, like, that makes me pretty uneasy.
Mhm.
But I will say, one thing, other thing, actually, I wanted to ask you both is, you credit Trump's policies and some of the university's new rules and definitions of anti-Semitism for this sort of dying down of this protest movement. But part of me has to wonder, is not some of it at least just fatigue? I mean, are people not just tired of the constant protests, the constant controversy, the constant media attention? Is at a certain point, are students just like, God damn, I just came here to, like, go to class, like, I do actually want to get a degree and learn something,
Yes, certainly. This is actually the point that I was about to bring up as Nikos was wrapping up sort of his analysis. Anytime you see sort of these protest movements, I mean, you can point to the Black Lives Matter protests and post-COVID, like 2020 and 2021, and just seeing sort of the drop off that happened between 2020 and 2021, and then right around the 2-year mark in 2022. Even sort of like the Hong Kong democracy protests, which actually there were a lot of those on Columbia's campus. I think that was the prequel to everything that was happening with the Gaza stuff. Like, you had a lot of students in Butler Plaza and College Walk gathered with their lights and lanterns, and it was really a profound moment in the university's history. And so right now, I think you're seeing a similar thing with just the general fatigue and sort of the lack of engagement, the sort of weeding out of those who are simply here because it's like the next sort of like popular thing to care about, and those who are genuinely dedicated to the cause. And so just the general fatigue that accompanies all major protest movements. We're right around, actually, we just passed the 2-year mark of October 7th. And so certainly fatigue, I would argue, is just as much, if not more of a factor than the rules. And the rules are certainly important as well. I also think, to echo what you said, Clay, about this idea of students just wanting to come here to learn and be tired of this. In a sense, this is actually a really, really good thing for open discourse, because in the aftermath of all of this division, in the aftermath of sort of the chaos and then the NYPD and being written about in the New York Times, CBS, etc., right? You're now seeing this fertile ground for people like us, for like people to be able to offer an alternative and say, hey, now we can, out of the ashes of this, let's create a new movement of open discourse, which is not only good sort of for the campus climate, but is also essential to helping students learn, because now there can be sort of a cultural movement in place that helps you navigate these different ideas. And that translates really smoothly into the classroom as well. And so it really helps people normalize discourse, normalize debate in a way that they probably wouldn't have been able to the last 2 years, just because of how charged everything was and sort of the chaos and inability to navigate all of these different things happening at once.
And I am just curious too. you guys obviously are talking to other students, and I'm assuming that hopefully you do have friends who maybe disagree with you or have different perspectives on like the Israel-Palestine issue and the protests at Columbia. Are they telling you anything specifically? Like people who did or would have participated in these protests, are you talking to them at all? Are they telling you anything about how they're thinking and feeling and what's motivating them to
Well,
not do
yes.
this stuff?
I mean, obviously, the standard response that you keep on getting incessantly is Trump is a fascist. This is a fascist takeover of Colombia. Colombia is complicit. Colombia is Vichy on the Hudson, whatever. I mean, you keep on hearing this, to which, again, I say this as somebody who is very anti-war, right? I am not a fan of the amount of people that have died in Gaza as a result of Israel's
Can I
military
say
campaign
that,
there.
Nikos,
Not
that
a
is the
fan,
most
right?
controversial take I've heard all week, I think, maybe all month. I'm not a fan of all the people that have died
Not
in
a fan.
Gaza. real, that's a
really
tough one. Yeah.
heterodox view, Mr.
Real
Sundial.
heterodox view, yeah.
But especially I'm not a fan of Israel's actions. I think that they they just went totally overboard with it. But so I say this as somebody who is always very much opposed to the war on those grounds. But to insinuate that this is unique in American history, that what Trump is doing is uniquely authoritarian, to me just does not hold the sort of test of history, because all we have to do is go back to 2014 to Barack Obama's Department of Education, who, in their Dear Colleague letter, essentially forced universities to adopt racial quotas.
Yeah.
I
The
mean,
Exactly.
problem is, yeah, the federal government funds private institutions. Private institutions are not directly accountable to the First Amendment. And so that opens up a mechanism, for better or for worse, but it is a mechanism that exists. It opens up a mechanism for the federal government to apply pressure directly on universities
Right.
and say that, this is what we want. This is our interest for the nation. We are funding you. So comply or lose the funding.
I mean, in the
Right.
1970s, right, you had sort of Richard Nixon, and even after that, Jimmy Carter, their departments of, I forget whether it was education or something else, but one of their federal agencies communicated this to many universities, saying, we're going to withhold your funding if you don't enforce affirmative action. Like this was, there is deep precedent for this. I mean, even if I personally disagree with the decision to cut funding. I believe research funding to a university like Columbia, NIH grants, FCS stuff. This is incredibly valuable. At the same time, though, obviously, right, a lot of it is within sort of the federal government's purview to do so, seeing as it is sort of their money, and this is not necessarily sort of a congressional appropriation all the time. Clay, you mentioned something about sort of the people we talk to or the people we talk to from across sort of the ideological spectrum, specifically those who are on the front lines protesting. I know I have a lot of friends who have been sort of leading this protest movement. I know Nikos, you and I talk with one of my very good friends who's a big part of this. And the response that I'm getting, surprisingly, right, obviously we get all the stuff that Nikos just mentioned, right? The anti-Trump stuff, the Columbia's complicit stuff, like from all of my friends who are involved in this, we do get that. At the same time, though, something that is very interesting, and there's an article in The Spectator about this actually as well, this idea that there can be no climate of genuine open discourse without sort of the robust exchange of ideas, and for them they consider protests to be a keen part of that. Like I've been surprised in my conversations I've had with people who are in like Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, or Sunrise, or the Palestine Solidarity Coalition. Even in these circles, right, I think there is an appetite. I mean, I'm not going to generalize, right? There are some people who are like, we don't want to associate anti-normalization. Certainly, we've run into that. But there is an appetite even for those people who the media and sort of people like us would regard as sort of quintessentially polarized, they do want to talk, but in their eyes, sort of they view the expression of sort of their pro-Palestinian sentiment or things of that nature as something that could get them in trouble, or get them referred to OIE or CSSI. And so honestly, there is this intersection between policy and culture that's really interesting. And the same thing goes for the conversations we've had with people like on the right. I mean, in this semester, we've talked with hundreds of students from literally every single political persuasion. So that commonality of this frustration with policy and how that can also lead to a transformation of culture has been really interesting to watch.
Now, I'm wondering, in your interaction with these people, are they, I don't want to use the word oblivious, but I guess I will. Are they oblivious to the association between like this desire to talk about things pro-Palestine and the fact that so much of the chaos has been attributed to the pro-Palestine protests? Like, do they not see that they're entangled with that association, or that association exists? And I think in that space of awareness, they'd be able to maybe make better moves on their own end of things. But do you get that sense that they're not aware that, well, you know, if we want to protest, we want to speak out, maybe we should not, maybe we should tend to our own people who are lashing out rather?
Yeah, I think the strategy of activism in many cases, right? Like one of the conversations I was having with somebody was about this idea of sort of why they answer the question, do you condemn Hamas, or why they sort of use the rhetoric that they do. And so much of this, right? And this probably should come as no surprise. I know, Anthony, you've done a lot of work on this as well. So much of this is a fad or a psyop in the sense that it's meant to provoke, right? Like this has been a key strategy of activists for like centuries. I mean, the firebombing of alma mater, right, in the 70s, and how they poured paint on alma mater during the Vietnam protests as well. Like this sort of reactionary brand of progressivism is this kind of thing that really isn't new. And my frustration with this, and I agree with you, right? This is something I tell people all the time, that like even for protesters, right? Even if we were to sort of go inside their rationalities for a second and talk about their goals, if they wanted, and I've told them this too, like if they wanted to have more people like support their cause, the people in the middle who they really need to support their cause, because there's always going to be like a 10 or 20% fringe minority who will be the loud voices. But I told them this, that if they really wanted to increase their platform, the best way to do that is being open sort of to discourse, because it gives you a bigger platform. If you do it in the quote unquote right way, you won't run into trouble sort of with the university. It doesn't require you to even moderate your positions. It just requires you to not think in terms of what will be most provocative or this idea of activist imagery, and think in sort of more practical terms of how can we convince people to listen to our ideas. And so unfortunately, you are right. There is a large portion of people who can't seem to realize the direct relationship between sort of those divisive actions and rhetoric, like platforming the Kamani Jameses of the world, and sort of how that's really, honestly, like deterred even the pro-Palestinian cause. And I could say the same for voices on the Israeli side as well.
But look, even You Can Take Me, I think, is a very good example of this. We obviously had our whole podcast episode about the ways that I'm on the left and the ways that I'm very pissed off at a lot of what happens on the left, nonetheless. But like, they should be able to get somebody like me involved in their movement. I'm fiercely anti-war. My economics are definitely mostly on the left, okay? Maybe on social issues and messaging, whatever, I'm more populist than I am strictly on the left. But I'd be like a perfect person to join their protest movement. The reason I don't is because I have consistently encountered a very fierce hostility. It's like, oh, we're not going to even talk to the Zionists. Well, it's like, no, you guys should also be pro free speech. The left should have a principled pro free speech position. You cannot go around and say, oh, I'm not going to talk to Zionists. Oh, this person won on Fox News. We're just not going to talk. We're just going to protest. That doesn't actually help your cause at all. And so I've personally just discovered that I have way more of a sense of ease, for example, talking to pro-Israel people about these things. I feel like there is not as much of a mentality that like, oh, you're either with us or you're against us. Again, at least at Columbia, I can't speak for America at large, but at least at Columbia, I've consistently encountered with um, more pro-Israel friends and peers that there has been more of an acceptance to just agree to disagree and to hear each other out.
Well, I think that would be a function of pressure too, to some degree, when you have a loud minority who's essentially navigating the culture of campus and really putting a wrench in the gears for everyone. There's almost this resistance, or this like quiet resistance that's, that there's been on the pro-Israel side, but it's also this sort of succumbing to the fact that, well, we really don't have as loud of a voice here, so we're just not going to make as much of a fuss. And I wonder if that has been your sense of, because I remember too, like being there for those 2 years, and I had a similar experience, more of like, well, we know our cause, we know our case, this is crazy what's going on, but we're not going to push past a certain limit, lest we be, castigated and punished and called names and all that stuff.
And like all things, it really depends on the situation and the person in particular. But I think one of the issues, right, that Nikos mentioned is sort of the idea of anti-normalization. Like, just for some context, right? This is my second year. When I was a freshman, I worked with a lot of people in sort of the Trust Collaboratory, do the listening tables, and also work with former President Armstrong to come up with this idea of like a Israeli-Palestinian peace initiative, like facilitating panel discussions between community members on both sides. And I really reached out to a wide variety of folks from all sorts of swaths of the pro-Israel and pro-Palestine movement, right? And the common response I got sort of on the pro-Palestine side was the idea of anti-normalization, because of course BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, not to get too into the weeds on Israel and Palestine, but that's sort of that bars a lot of people from engaging in dialogue, which I just think is quite frankly dumb. I don't want to get too much into it because we could probably spend a whole day talking about that, but I mean, really, from Mohsen Madawi, who's been awesome in sort of all of this. He was sort of the leading Palestinian voice on dialogue. He was the only one really willing to work with us, Trust Collaboratory. I know Bridge USA was involved in this as well. On the pro-Israel side, last year certainly I had like more interest in this. I think there is sort of this willingness to engage, just because on one hand they are the ideological minority on campus, and so I think for them any opportunity to get their message out, to engage in dialogue, is certainly advantageous, just because there's a lot of spin in the media that goes on. Just in terms of sort of why that is the case, I think there's also, like, obviously I'm sure you guys have heard of this, like there is a lot of doxing that goes on. There are a lot of these sort of websites, whether it's Canary Mission or documenting Jew hatred on campus, that have gained sort of this infamous reputation, in the sense that they that people have been on there, people like have been on there who think that they shouldn't have been on there, who have been like at the protests and not necessarily saying something. And so there certainly is a climate of fear that leads to this hesitation from the pro-Palestinian side, and obviously the federal government and ICE and everything plays a role as well. I mean, I just think that more broadly, they have valid reasons, but on an interpersonal scale, someone like me, even, I am very much a moderate. Like I am like pro-choice radically. I am like pro-gun control, pro-environment. Like I am not the kind of person that the left would seek to alienate, right? Like they should sort of have someone like me in their coalition. I represent sort of a broad 40 to 50% of America in the middle, right? And if someone like me is being alienated because of certain conservative leanings I have on things like immigration or foreign policy, I mean, like, that really is indicative of why we have this problem and why Trump got elected. Like, and like it's because, and why we have the situation in Columbia, because there is no willingness to understand the rationality of someone who even slightly differs from what you believe.
Yeah, and by the way, the concept of leftist students flirting with hard right Hamas Islamofascism is like one of the most fascinating things to me, whilst simultaneously disparaging a far more moderate right wing government in Washington is the real fascists. It's very fascinating how they've
Oh,
gotten everything mixed up.
you will find
Like
no
Hamas is
pushback.
not a leftist organization. I
No.
can assure you that.
No. They're, I believe the term is useful idiots. I think to a degree. I mean, this is a whole nother episode, so we can't get into this. But
Sure.
it's like I often ask myself, to what degree, like, are these students useful idiots, and to what degree are some of them at least kind of on board with a lot of it? Because there is so much oikophobia, this hatred of the West, that I think to a degree, at least some of them are like, okay, if they're anti-West, they are by default good. And I am worried that there is a lot of that going on in these kinds of circles, but I couldn't say to what degree and how honest it is, or how well informed it is. It's complicated, but I want to move on, because you guys are pointing out a lot of good things, or I should say interesting things, right? That, you have these problems in these movements, these protest movements on campus and with the students, where they either feel pressured not to engage in open dialogue, or they just don't want to, or both. And so I want to move to the solution, or at least one attempt at a solution, which is we've mentioned several times, is CODA, the Columbia Open Discourse Alliance, which, I said at the top, it was kind of my brainchild, which I can't, my baby in a sense. I can't take full credit for it, because several people, like different people, had in conversation with me had mentioned, like, we should have this thing, this like central node where people from all these different groups and of all these different perspectives could sort of come together and work together to advance this common goal of facilitating conversations across different opinions, across differences of ideology. And to sort of act as like, a central node, a meeting point, a sort of common, like agora, if you will, on campus to facilitate and bring about these conversations, these debates, these interactions. And so I just sort of got the ball rolling on that, and then I obviously graduated, so I left it to you guys. But I honestly haven't kept up with how it's doing. I hate to say. So I want to know, how is CODA doing?
Of course.
And what's the latest with CODA?
I mean, this semester, like first of all, thank you both for for getting this ball rolling. I mean, in all of these meetings, like, we tell people that this has really been sort of this has been inspired by you guys. Like you guys had the idea, the name. I mean, this like this really wouldn't have been possible without you two starting it. So thank you. And really, it's been an amazing semester. I mean, I actually, funny enough, I was just at like midnight last night. I texted it in our group chat. I was telling Nikos and Chloe that I just put everything that happened with CODA on paper, just to recognize sort of the impact we've made in less than 90 days. I mean, we obviously, we have this coalition of 6 groups. I mean, just for the listeners who aren't familiar, CODA is a nonpartisan free speech coalition of groups from across the ideological spectrum. We seek to foster viewpoint diversity, open inquiry, dialogue, the fearless pursuit of truth. I think we have 6 current members. Like, we have the Platypus Society, which is a Marxist reading group, the Columbia University College Republicans. We have the American Enterprise Institute's on board as well. Who else? The Sundial's involved. Heterodox Academy, obviously, which is also your creation. I think Ellie Noam's doing a lot of great work there. And we also have the Columbia Academic Freedom Council, which is a new member, which is a coalition of 100 professors who very much believe in the same ideals as CODA. And so far, I mean, we've done a lot of great work in terms of working on dialogue with the administration as well. Like, we've built really good relationships with like over 10 senior administrators, including like Jonathan Kahn, who's the senior associate dean for community and culture. We've met with the Institute for Global Politics, a bunch of advisors to the presidents. We just got Katrina Armstrong on our faculty advisory board a
Nice.
few days
Wow.
ago.
Yeah.
She's all in as well. And like Peter Coleman, Mark Lilla, Hamid Dabashi, John McCorder is on board as well. And obviously Ellie Noam.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Very
certainly
nice.
building a huge
My.
net.
So
we
one
just-
thing that I will just jump in to add, I see how astonished you are, Anthony. The credit for all of this goes to relentlessly no, but seriously, relentlessly emailing everyone and doing like a million things at once, and then just bombarding the group chat, telling me and Chloe like, oh, I did this, and then 2 hours later I did this other thing. Whereas my scope is definitely more limited, but yeah, he's delivered us some pretty impressive results.
Too.
Just
but yeah.
amazing, though. I mean, it's Clay. Isn't it great to hear that? I mean, that is so.
It's awesome. I'm
yeah.
so proud and slightly jealous. I think it's great, man.
So and recently, right? I think this is probably the most important of everything. We just organized this event on December 3rd. It was called the State of Free Speech at Columbia, where it was a panel discussion. We had a representative from Platypus, Eunice. We had Jessica Weinfeld, who is the president of the Columbia College Republicans. We had Alex Nagin, editor-in-chief of Sundial, and Nick Baum, who is on Bridge's executive board as well. And it was a really good discussion. We had over 50 people attend. We organized this shit in like 10 days, low-key, because we initially were supposed to do a press freedom event, and the administration threw all sorts of bureaucracy and rules at us, and so we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have a writer from the Jacobin, a writer from Manhattan Institute, the editors-in-chief of CPR and Sundial, and somebody from the Blue and White. That was going to be co-sponsored by FIRE. We were building a good relationship with them, and all of this just sort of fell through because of some administrative bureaucracy. So,
of course,
I mean, there's a saying in my favorite TV show, House of Cards, which is, if you don't like how the table is set, turn over the table. And so that's what we ended up doing. I think I ran to the Republicans weekly general body meeting because it was just wrapping up, and I was like, Jessica, can we do this? And I immediately texted Aaron from Platypus, like, Aaron, can we do this? And then there was a lot of buy-in. Nikos did an amazing job moderating this discussion, by the way. I mean, we were supposed to go from 7 to 8:30. We started 7:15, and we finished like over 20 minutes later than expected, and we still had more questions from the audience than we knew what to do with. I mean, at one point the audience even started debating each other. Like, people laughed, they were glued to their seats, there was not a single phone in sight. Like, in my 1.5 years, and the panelists get all the credit for this, this was truly the best dialogue event that I've seen on our campus. And I know I'm going on for a bit now, but I guess the conclusion to all of this, and conclusion to the work that we're doing at CODA and what we've advised all these university task forces and administrative people, is if you give students a space to genuinely talk with no bullshit, no sort of watered down discussion, right? If you give students a space where they can say whatever the fuck they want to say, and really just get to talk with one another and see what each other believes, right? People will buy into that because there is authenticity, and they feel like they're learning something from one another. Like, after the event, we had people stay behind for clusters of 4 to 10 for another 20 minutes to continue the discussion. People who have never met before. And what that really showed me is this is a cultural movement. Like, this is a counterculture of, to coin the term from the 70s, of free speech and dialogue that can cut through the noise of division, protests, like federal government intervention, everything, right? And this is something that we can really build. So I'm really excited as to all CODA accomplished in less than 90 days. And we're just getting started. We still have a long time to go.
No, I'm sold on it. I think this is amazing. The only thing I'm wondering is, where are the Democrats?
Yeah, good question. Good question.
Yes, this is a conversation,
because I like all the internal dialogue that's going on at that event that you said. That's a great sign. But yeah, that we're
one thing that I'm gonna add. Sorry, go ahead, Clay.
I was just gonna say, just to reiterate for our audience. So we've got Marxists, we've got conservatives and right wingers, we've got heterodox kind of centristy types. and maybe even left-leaning centristy types, but like where are the Democrats? That's like a glaring omission, right? So we've got all of this wide spectrum, but we're missing, Democrats and leftists of a certain kind.
Yeah,
Right.
this is what I was going to say, that I think that really, if you look at both the protests that have been happening at Columbia, but then also a lot of the officially democratic politics that is happening at Columbia, you have a bunch of students who just simply do not want to engage with the right. This is an issue. I mean, I really don't want to hear, because you typically get the right winger standard thing that they say, which is, oh, well, the colleges are being taken over by the Marxists. Oh, it's the Marxists that we can't speak to. I'm very biased here because I'm also involved with Platypus. But I think that if you do look at CODA, no, the Marxists are there. The Marxists are there, and they're having a conversation.
It's a misnomer. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But the Democrats aren't. They're really the ones that are hard to get to. The kids that I think feel like, oh, well, campus, the general student body of campus is on my side. Like, my beliefs are in line with the beliefs of the ideological majority of New York. I don't need to give a fuck about you guys. You guys are weird, whatever. And I'm correct. And this is a mentality that I think we really need to seriously combat.
Can I just say that? And I'm writing actually an article in the Spectator about this. Should be coming out later today or maybe tomorrow. I think a lot of it has to do with this culture of sort of pre-professionalism, and this very sort of political, corporate, I think, mentality, which is this fear of being associated with things that could sort of tarnish your name as a club. I mean, like in the case of the Columbia Democrats, I mean, I don't want to sort of like speak on behalf of them, but I think part of their rationality is they signed on to the CUAD letter in spring of 24, and that was one of those things where they were associated as one of the 93 or so whatever groups with CUAD without understanding sort of what signing on to that letter meant, because there were some beliefs that they did condemn of CUAD, and then there was this back and forth. So I think for them, they have a lot of whiplash about this idea of coalitions. This is something really that's prevalent across the establishment left, and not even just at Columbia, right? This idea of having a very cautious, bureaucratic approach to things. I personally think that it's failed them in many ways, right? We're in conversations. Look, we're in conversations with the Columbia Democrats. I mean, they, like, a couple of them texted me after the event to express sort of their praise for the panel. Some of them were supposed to come, and then they had some issues. I mean, it's finals week, so finals prep week, so people are busy. But for the next semester, right, we're certainly going to see if they can take a vote on it. We really are doing a lot to try and get them on board, because obviously they represent, I think, the majority viewpoint on campus in a way that the Marxists and the Republicans obviously do not, right? And we would love to have them, right? Like this is a problem with the perception of anything that's free speech related. Like, it's always going to be seen, like anything dialogue will be seen as this right wing sort of front. And the groups in CODA, like there's the Republicans, American Enterprise Institute. Sundial has a conservative reputation, which I think it shouldn't. I don't think it's a conservative magazine, right? And so there's this paranoia. And it's not even just the Democrats. Like there's a lot of organizations that we've talked to, right, who have expressed this. There is this paranoia of being seen as associated with the right wing. And speaking bluntly, right, we are 18 to 22-year-old undergrads, right? Like, our frontal lobes are not even fully developed. No one really gives a shit, right? Like, who you associate with and who you don't, right? This is not going to tangibly make less people read a publication's articles or less people come to a club's meeting, right? And I tell them this. I tell all these people this. And we ask these people every week, right? Like, people think we don't try. We like all these people are complaining that, oh, we're right wing. I mean, to speak candidly, if we're so right wing, like, join us and make make us more moderate. Like, you have the power to make this a more moderate enterprise in terms of its perception. But we are proudly nonpartisan, right? Like, and at this point, Nikos and I we had this conversation recently. Like, I'm just done trying to appeal to this, because we know what we are. We know we're nonpartisan. We know that we're acting in good faith, and eventually, people will see that and they'll see the movement we're building on campus and all the people coming to our events, and they'll join us.
Yeah, it's funny. So I have a couple thoughts. It just reminds me of that meme that's talking about some YouTuber or something that's like talking about leftist, and she's like, they don't want power, they just want to endlessly critique power. And I feel like with Democrats at Columbia and maybe more broadly in a lot of places, it's like they don't want you to moderate your views. They want to endlessly critique you for not moderating your views, at least as they see it, right, through their lens, right?
Right.
The other thing I wanted to briefly say is, Nikos, I what you said kind of way back early when you were speaking, it just made me think of this thing that is, for me, is so true, which is Platypus, this, the Marxist reading group. There is not a group on earth, I think, with whom I so fundamentally disagree on so many things, whose company I enjoy more, whose conversation I enjoy more. Like, I love Erin. She's great. That's the president of the Platypus Society. Yes. You're obviously affiliated with it. I think you're great. I love Erin. She's great. We disagree on so much. And that's just the power of conversation, because you can learn from each other. And this is like, I'm sorry, this is campy and cheesy, but like truly when you just like learn to like people and enjoy their perspective, even if you disagree with it, you learn so much. It's so valuable. And that's why it's such a shame that like the Columbia Democrats are struggling with this. At least it seems like they are based on what you're telling me so much. But I do want to get to a question I have about the event that you just held on Wednesday specifically, which is, what are you hearing in these conversations? So you're talking about, you have this conversation that you guys host that runs longer than you expected to, and then people are breaking out into groups even after the fact, and they have all these audience questions. What kinds of things are coming up? What are people debating? What are they agreeing on? Maybe that might surprise us, or yeah, like what are people talking about?
I think that when you're organizing and you're leading these things, you really have to know what's in your heart and what you actually believe. So I can be called right wing or conservative or some like pro Trump maniac by any Columbia student. Um, I know that I'm not a conservative, and I know that even if I was, that would be totally okay. And so it's like your bullshit screaming is just frankly not gonna work against me. I already had a lot of this experience last year when I joined the Sundial, because I was like totally on board with the mission, to have different pieces, free speech, heterodox ideas out there in the space at Columbia. And I remember that when I joined and I would tell my friends, tell acquaintances, they would be like, "Oh, so you're a conservative. Why are you affiliated with the conservative magazine? Do you have any idea that Jonas is a propagandist that goes on Fox?" Look, again, I know what's in my heart. I know what's in my heart when I'm doing CODA. You can call me whatever you want. By the way, this doesn't exclusively happen from the Democratic side. I recently wrote an article in the Sundial about Professor Ivana Hughes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. She's the
She does Desai, like Frontiers of Science. She's like the core class, like she's the chair of that.
It's the required course that all freshmen at the college need to take. And she went on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and they ended up having a very interesting conversation about the impacts of nuclear Armageddon. So basically, like what would happen in a nuclear exchange. And for a Tucker interview, it was actually fairly apolitical. And so I wrote about it and I interviewed Dr. Hughes. And so I tried to get out her perspective as to why she wanted to go on Tucker's show. And I mostly agreed with her, because I think that, having interviewed her and having listened to the interview, I saw somebody in Dr. Hughes who was very willing to reach out to people across the political aisle. She's on the left. Tucker's obviously on the right, but that she's motivated by this populist concern for people, and also that she's motivated by her concern for nuclear war becoming something disastrous. Ira Stoll, who is I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's quite a famous conservative journalist. He commented on my post, essentially insinuating that I was a Nazi for what I'd written, and that I was doing some weird hybrid of The Nation and Al Jazeera. I'm using this as an example to show that both the right and the Democrats, the left, whatever. Like, people will always just sometimes really hate you for stuff you say. Fundamentally, again, obviously, I know I'm not a Nazi, so he can say whatever he wants, and I think that's just very important to know when you're organizing these
Well,
things.
Nico, there's no need to lie. If you want to come out as a Nazi on this podcast, we'll
I think
accept you.
I think now's the time to do it. I've been thinking
Finally,
a lot
yeah.
about it, guys. I've been scrolling through Instagram, and this guy Adolf Hitler. I mean,
Yeah, this Fuentes character,
This
I'm really
Fuentes
liking what
kid.
he's. Yeah,
I've been seeing
Well,
some
actually-
interesting
Yeah, you know what?
videos.
he's right. Hitler was cool, and having sex with women is gay.
For sure.
No,
Yeah.
and we all know that Jonas is actually a shill for the Mossad for Israel.
Right,
I've seen
right.
the
Of
checks.
course,
They
yes.
sign it
Yes.
to Jonas from the Mossad. XOXO.
And I
Unbelievable.
guarantee you, some dipshit's gonna think we're actually
Yeah.
that we weren't.
This is gonna get clipped.
It
and I'm
always
s- and I'm
happens.
so hyped. It always happens.
No,
Yeah.
some idiot is all like no. I'll give you a story. Like we were asked to comment on this article about something that the president of Barnard, Laura Rosenberry, wrote in the New York Times, and Spectator asked us to comment. And we said, because it was about like this idea in the aftermath of sort of Charlie Kirk dying, about this idea of putting in or having more controversial speakers at universities to challenge ideas, which is objectively a really good thing. Like
Yeah.
she talked a lot about this idea of you having to have discomfort, and having that be one of the defining traits in discomfort and exploration of ideas in terms of what it means to be at a university. And there was this analogy that she gave about sort of people. She gave this analogy about like comparing people who said that Charlie Kirk, because he was very pro-gun, getting shot and killed. She compared that to people asking a rape victim, like what was she wearing, and like she made that analogy during the article. And so we didn't say anything in our comment about it. We just said that we strongly support the sentiments in there. And I kid you not, I got like over 10 text messages and like DMs from idiots saying like,
Wow.
so you support comparing Charlie Kirk to sexual assault. And I was like, nowhere in this article or nowhere in our statement did we even address that. And so there are always going to be people who take what you say out of, like, we put out a statement, actually. We put out a statement, CODA did, condemning like his killing, and it was totally nonpartisan. I mean, we even asked like people from the Columbia Democrats, hey, is this okay? And they're like, yeah, we would have put this out too. The College Democrats of America put out a similar statement to us, and a bunch of people were like, and somebody even like was going to write an article to the Sundial about it. I won't mention their name, but somebody was going to write an article to the Sundial about it, like talking about how we're right wing because we wrote this statement on Charlie Kirk, and how Nikos wrote an article about Charlie Kirk, condemning it in a very forceful way. And I was like, come on, guys. We go to a school with a 3% acceptance rate. Have some more critical thinking. All this is to say, right?
But that's it. It's a collapse of critical thinking. It's
Exactly.
a hostile attribution bias and motivated reasoning. It's like people have their set of priors, and depending on how dug into the sand they are with their heels, whenever they experience some kind of cue that activates their biases, it's just right away, oh, so it's this, so therefore you mean. That is emblematic of split thinking, and
it is like there's a great, I mean, I'm sure you guys have like heard of, there's a great book by Greg Lukianoff and Ricky Schlott, The Coddling of the American Mind, I think, or something like that, right? And it talks about this, like this idea of like when you have been socialized to such a degree to where anything that veers outside your bubble of what is acceptable, there's a psychological response in your brain that says this is unfamiliar, this is enemy territory,
ambiguity.
It's tribalism. And so all this is to say, someone will take the stuff out of context. So
sorry about that, Nikos.
So
when you get accused of actually being a Nazi and they use that as proof, that's my bad.
I absolve myself of all guilt.
Yeah,
Whatever,
real quick,
man. I mean,
I believe you were mentioning it's the canceling of the American Mind that he wrote with Ricky
Canceling,
Schlott.
I was going to say,
Haidt wrote the Coddling of the American Mind, which predated that. But both very good books, which I recommend.
I'd like to click on. Can I click on something real quick
Go for it.
about the kind of culture that you're cultivating and what's represented at these meetings, this last one you mentioned. It's interesting because when you look at disciplines, academic disciplines and studies, different majors people have, there's a direct, it seems like, well, it's like there's an inversion, there's an inverted relationship. Well, you could look at the graph. I can snapshot it and send it to you guys at some point, but Clay, you could put it up in the show notes if you'd like. But it's interesting because when I think about the relationship between political party, political identity, ideology, and someone's profession, there's actually pretty good social science on this, where the more left-leaning a person is, the more in the humanities they are, and the more right-leaning a person is, the more in the STEM they're more affiliated with STEM programs. And it's interesting because a lot of people tend to think that conservatives don't show up and aren't more represented in universities because they're not as interested in the intelligentsia of the university. But that's actually not. Yeah, and that's funny because it seems, and I can't really clearly surmise this, but it does seem that more fiscally conservative individuals end up in the STEM programs, and there's a certain kind of reasoning that goes along with that, numerical, quantitative, and the literature does support this, that there's high IQ related to fiscal conservatism. We could talk about social conservatism and how, maybe it goes up on the deep end and there's like a lower IQ there, but that's the same case the other way around. So this idea that, the STEM fields or the STEM disciplines are representing more right-leaning students, perhaps, it's interesting because there is that level of reasoning that's more conscientiously oriented, whereas the more left-leaning kind of abstract humanities degrees, liberals they do score higher on openness, openness to experience. So I almost wonder if what we're seeing in these heterodox spaces and CODA, if you're seeing more STEM students, more or kind of an equal balance between STEM and, or do you take those metrics at all?
So one thing that is interesting is that I know that our website designer actually was at our panel, and then afterwards he came up to me.
He's my roommate.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh my God, this actually went so well. I ended up becoming so interested in it. I'm gonna go around C's and now tell people about this." And so he was initially just gonna come and take a couple of photos, and he actually ended up really enjoying it and staying for the entire panel.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think our reach is always going to be more with humanities kids, just because of and social studies, just because of the nature of what we're doing. I think there's more interest in open discourse and in debate, in the social studies and in the humanities. And not to self-aggrandize, but when I was moderating the panel, I was honestly very shocked, but in a positive sense, that I looked around and students were taking notes, um, by hand, by the way.
Yep.
Insane, right? I would never. You'd have to force me to do that in a class.
I wouldn't
So
go to a panel
I
and
would
take
never go
notes.
to a panel and take notes by hand. Other students were laughing because, there were some funny moments that came up occasionally, but everyone was engaged. I barely saw anyone on their phones. So, I mean, there was definitely, amongst those 50 people that decided to show up, there was a tremendous amount of engagement. Just something as well about the Charlie Kirk thing, which I mentioned, and which I think we got a backlash for very unfairly. Generally, at Columbia, there seemed to be this sense that, like, yeah, Charlie Kirk died, but he was a terrible person, so it's totally fine to, like, not really care about his assassination, to brush it aside, or to even celebrate it. This is something that I did actually investigate and write an article about, and there were students celebrating his death openly on SideChat. The Columbia Federalist, our humor publication, They decided to run a satire piece on him
Too soon.
literally
Too
way
soon.
too soon, like within an hour.
In the hours. In the hours. Like
I think
yeah.
within the hour, if I remember
Wow.
correctly. I don't want to say something false, but I'm pretty sure it was like literally within the hour that he died. They ran a piece saying TPUSA unexpectedly changes stance on Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So
That's disgusting.
I mean,
It's completely out of context. Like that, it was just that's abhorrent.
I mean,
and
I think they're
disgusting.
allowed to. They're
Yeah,
allowed to
but
do
you're
that.
also allowed to
I
judge
don't think
them
they
for
should
poor
face any
taste.
like repercussions for it, but it's very disgusting to do, I think.
Right.
In the immediate aftermath of the most high-profile political assassination since the 60s. I mean, this is something that even if you're on the left, even if you're a Democrat, even if you vehemently disagreed with Charlie Kirk, and by the way, I was shit-talking him to you guys, like
Right,
the month
right.
prior, saying that a lot of his views were just, frankly, in my opinion, not correct. The weird way that he was like, Taylor, now submit to your husband. A lot of his very hostile rhetoric about Mamdani, not because of his ideas, but because of the fact that he's a Muslim, I found to be totally like not okay. But none of that matters. That's the point. None of it matters because this was the
Yeah.
most high profile political assassination since the 1960s. It's a really fucking terrible place to be in as a country. And like, yeah, if you're a Democrat as well, you better be scared because like everyone should be scared. This is not a good place to be in.
I'll a shameless self plug here is I wrote on my Substack a piece called "You Should Watch Charlie Kirk Die," and I actually believe that I think that if you watch the video, I think not enough people are scared. Sorry, are afraid of political violence. And I actually think it's in a weird way it's good to watch. You got a lot of people saying you shouldn't watch the video because it is disturbing, but I'm like, no, that's why you should watch it. You should watch this man die in front of a group of people and be horrified and realize like, oh, more of this is a very bad thing. And we're too comfortable and we're too safe. And that should be a shock to the system.
The only thing I would push on, and I agree with your stance on that. I have since you published it. I just think at some point we can reach a point of desensitization where people, and we have on social media, where people just sort of toss it off as just another thing. I think that's happened a lot with mass shootings.
I mean, they talk about him
for
getting
sure.
like, clipped like it's on like a video game or something. But I just want to and to echo what you said, Clay. Like this is why what we are doing is like this is why we do what we do, right? Like I think I'll give you an example. So I went to and this relates to Charlie Kirk as well. Like so I went to a very progressive liberal arts high school. And I love, to be clear, I love my time there. Like I'm very proud of my alma mater in high school, and it really did develop me as a person, full disclosure. So I'm not bashing it in any way. But when I was a freshman, right, I had a lot more conservative beliefs than I do now. I mean, I was a 14-year-old boy. Like I didn't really know how the world worked. But
many such cases.
I was getting,
don't worry. Okay.
yes, many such cases. But I think I said something about Black Lives Matter, and some student literally threatened to break my jaw. Like when I was like 14 or 15. I remember this very vividly. He was like, if you say anything bad about BLM, I'm going to break your jaw. Right. And that moment really stuck with me. And then I talked to my very close friend, who I'm still close friends with today, who's also at Columbia. We went to high school together as well. And he's actually leading a lot of the protest stuff, ironically. So I talked to him about this, and we started a lot of this work in our high school with panels and presentations. I think the one thing we actually talked about was Jonathan Haidt's like moral foundations theory. And the idea of sort of the shared foundations of reciprocity and fairness, liberty, sanctity, loyalty to the in-group, authority, and sort of how different people have different combinations of these. And if you understand the rationale and you frame your beliefs through the prioritization of somebody else's moral foundations, they're more likely to empathize with you. We did these kinds of things for 3 or 4 years. And after that, a bunch of students came up to us and said, because of the work you're doing, we feel more safe. And that was the impetus about why I got involved so much with dialogue on Columbia, because this is why this is so important. When people stop talking, like, bad shit happens. Like this Charlie Kirk happens when people stop talking, right? Like when like people like there is real violence that occurs. And so this like the work that we are doing is not just sort of another like watered down initiative. Some people even call it a distraction from like the struggle of the oppressed versus the oppressor. I mean, both the left and the right will like say things like, oh, dialogue is a distraction. It's not like a real political issue. But realistically, this is like free speech and dialogue is the defining issue of our time. We're the most polarized generation since the 1960s. And if we don't solve this, right, we're not going to have a country anymore. So I tell people this, that if we can make, through the work that we do with CODA, if we can make one person, even one person, feel safer and persuade one person to change their mind and say, oh, okay, I understand why you see the world differently. Even if you don't agree with what I'm saying, I understand why you believe what you believe. That is what matters. Like I think so often we get lost on like what the mission of dialogue is. And it's not to put a lid on things. It's not to cool people down. It's not to water people's beliefs down or make people quote unquote more centrist or more moderate. It truly is to prevent stuff like that. Like that video was really, for me, a radicalizing moment because it showed that the work that we're doing is just that much more important. And like Melissa Hortman in Minnesota, like the assassinations on President Trump, I mean, like this is a very concerning trend. It's been going on for the last 10 years. There's been like 25 political assassination attempts, and there were 2 compared between 2015 and 1968. So this has got to stop, and the only way it stops is through the work that people like us are doing.
And yeah, I think a lot of people also forget, partly because Trump doesn't really talk about it, but a lot of people forget the fact that our current president almost died.
Yeah.
Like
inches away.
literally
An inch
inches away, yeah. Or even less. And so
If he turned his head this way, yeah.
Yeah.
and that was already something that, you know, we had to see a former president to become the current president, like, having his ear wounded and blood gushing out. And I think that already should have served as a very strong testament to the fact that we do have a problem. But and then obviously, you know, somebody being shot in the neck with blood gushing out, literally there to debate students, literally there to engage in the work of
Of
promoting discourse. Like I do
Yeah.
understand this Democrat liberal criticism of Charlie Kirk, which goes something along the lines of, well, he had the TPUSA professor watch list. He was more interested in just promoting MAGA in whichever Machiavellian way possible. And he wasn't actually really that interested in free speech. Look, was Charlie Kirk the most interested person in open discourse? No, he wasn't. Did he have a political agenda of coalition building? Because like obviously TPUSA has been this like major force in campus conservatism, but and then also in just conservatism more broadly and getting young people involved in MAGA. Yes, of course he had a political agenda. Still, I think you have to look at the fact that he did go to these college campuses where conservatives were typically in the ideological minority, and he was eagerly debating students. Now, sometimes he owned the students because they were being dumb, but other times the students owned him. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, that
Well,
is
it's like- so-
fundamentally discourse.
Yeah, I mean, Ezra Klein writes that great piece. Charlie Kirk was the exact title. I think Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way.
Yeah, he got
something
so
like
much shit
And
for it as well.
he got
these
so much
people
shit for it, but, like-
Ta-Nehisi Coates being like, "Oh, how dare you?" and
please.
like, fuck so.
The-
I can't.
Ta-Nehisi
can't
Coates
with him.
is the most overrated thinker, I think, in our discourse right now. That's my hot take. Is he's a great writer, but like his as a thinker is just like meh. But
Exactly.
anyway, I digress. No, Ezra Klein writes this great piece. And he says Charlie Kirk is practicing politics the right way, and I think that's exactly right, and I agree with him. And like to your point, Nikos, like yes, he had an alternative, like. Or not an alternative. He had an ulterior motive, or like not even, maybe it's not even fair to call it that. He had an agenda, right? He had an agenda which was to promote Trump and the MAGA movement. But you know what? Going, like you said, going to college campuses where you are in the minority, ideologically speaking, and talking to college students is practicing politics the right way. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter that you like have an
Yeah.
agenda. Everyone has an agenda. It's how you pursue that agenda. And he pursued that agenda by just talking to people and arguing with them and conversing with them. And that's exactly what you should do. That's the right way to do it.
And
right?
Clay, I think I just want to
Right.
I just want to expand on that, just kidding. And this is a good transition to sort of the next topic as it relates to sort of speech, which is sort of the administrative side of things. Is that like for decades this has been, and this is sort of where I have a little bit of hope. For decades, this was a right-wing issue. If you said free speech, right? Even Fire was defending sort of conservative professors who would like say something racist or something, or say like that were getting fired, right? Like for decades, like this idea of free speech was a conservative issue. It had a conservative connotation about like the Republican who got a bad grade because their liberal professor said X, right? And now the shoe is really on the other foot as well. Like the left is now being impacted by free speech, whether it's Mahmoud Khalil or Mesa Osterk, her op-ed, and with the ICE stuff. So my hope is now that sort of both sides have really fallen victim to this and seen what happens when people don't talk and when there are forces at play, whether cultural or policy-based, that stifle that, and seeing what happens when that occurs, my hope is now that the shoe has been on both feet, that we can at least come together and have this commonality and say, you know what? When we don't talk and we don't have the ability to talk, right? Shit sucks, and it's bad. All of like we have a quote on the CODA website from Voltaire, which is, "I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Like that is our defining quote. It's on the primer we sent to all student groups interested, because that is really what we believe in. I mean, like you should be allowed to voice your ideas in the public square. Let's let the better idea win. The best way, and like to even beat like the Nick Fuenteses of the world, or to beat like the Ta-Nehisi Coates of the world, is to say it's a shit idea, but instead of censoring you, like we're going to debate this and we're going to let the better idea win. That is how societies have grown and thrived. That's how that's the logic of the Enlightenment. That's the logic of how our Constitution was written, of civil rights, of this is like the Great Debate. These are all core aspects of our advancement as a civilization. It's a fundamentally core Western value. And when we get away from that, right, it doesn't help anybody, not the left nor the right. It simply is just something that we need to prioritize.
And by the way, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was just gonna insert that my worry is that when those mechanisms, those Western values, Enlightenment values, are the very thing, when those are the very thing that are being harshly ridiculed and scrutinized, the mechanism itself to do the thing you're talking about, like where do you go from there? You know, because mechanistically, yes, those are that's what we need to promote our capacity to reason with one another, to debate one another. But one side really does seem to believe that very mechanism is the problem.
Yeah, so this is something that I think that I understand what is saying in terms of the pro-Palestinian side being on the left. And it's interesting because at Columbia, very much this paradigm does exist, where anything pro-Israel is branded typically as right-wing, and anything pro-Palestine is branded as left-wing, where in reality, most students who were pro-Israel at Columbia, I'm pretty
Also
sure,
left-wing.
voted for Kamala Harris. Now that doesn't necessarily, that wouldn't maybe necessarily make them left-wing or very left-wing, in my opinion. It also doesn't make them like Trump supporters, which is frequently how they're cast. And then on the other side of the coin, I mean, you have the pro-Palestinian kids who, okay, yes, again, in the majority, in some form or another affiliated with the Democratic Party, but they are really, I want to say they're single issue protesters. I do understand that a lot of times you get this alliance between the pro-Palestine cause and other things that are happening in the city, matters related to gentrification in Harlem or matters related to climate change. There are certain alliances, yes, but overall, the really big issue for them is Palestine. And equally for the pro-Israel side, the really big issue is Israel. And we just lose, I think, so much
Nonsense.
nuance and
Yeah.
um and and complexity in thought and complexity in politics when we try to categorize everything that happens on our campus as pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. So one of the things that I'm the most optimistic about is that now going into this academic year and going forward, now that these protests have died out, we're going to be able to get back to reasonable political discourse, not dominated by a war happening in the Middle East. Like, I get why people are pissed off about it. I really do. I'm one of those people. Like, my heart absolutely breaks watching what's happening in Gaza. Equally, my heart goes out to obviously the Israeli hostages. Like, it's a really bad situation. I get why people have been pissed off about it, but at some point, I think we need to recenter other issues because this has just gone on for too long.
We were talking
Right.
with Hamid Dabashi, who is a leading voice on sort of the progressive neo-colonial or like neo-anti-colonial imperialist left, right? He's a leading professor on this, and he's on our faculty advisory board, and the advice that he gave us was to not, the word he used was fetishize. He said, don't fetishize like the Israel-Palestine issue, because at some point your mission, because that's right now sort of the main thing as it relates to dialogue, he will say at some point, right, there will be a new issue and there will be another issue and one after that. And so this is something that has to transcend any one particular like issue, right? And so right now this is what's prominent on our campus. But this is in 50 years it'll be something else.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean that we take away from the moral urgency of these moments, right? Like we're not because we're not taking a position as an alliance, but it means that we have to see people and see the campus and see this political spectrum as far more than pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, because there is so much simplification. And when you have simplification, that's when people misunderstand each other. When they say, "Oh, you associate with this group, you're on this side. You associate with this group, you're on this side." When there is incredible nuance on the pro-Israel side, like you will have people who are progressive Zionists, and then you'll have people who are evangelical Zionists, and even on the pro-Palestinian side, you will have like peace-building sort of pro-Palestinian activists, and then you will have people who are much more sort of pro the resistance, right? There is incredible diversity of thought, and when you reduce labels to this like this binary of 0 and 1, right, that kills open discourse. It really does.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
It certainly does.
Well, you don't need to convince us. I'm sure, like we're champions of nuance in this podcast. I'm sure most of our audiences as well. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half here shortly, and I did want to get to one more topic that we had discussed prior to hitting record. I know that Anthony was particularly interested in as well. I kind of want to bring us back to just life at Columbia in general, or I should say life at Columbia more specifically, and talk about this idea that Columbia is going to increase the number of its undergraduates, incoming undergraduates. I think it was next year or next semester, I guess. No, what is it? It wouldn't be next semester; it'd be the semester after.
Next
we're in the
year,
fall semester. So
I
next,
think.
next year, next fall.
Yeah, and specifically it'd be Columbia College School of Engineering and Applied Science.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
up to, by up to 20%. Yeah.
That's a big increase. What do you guys think about that? Do you think the undergraduate class should grow, or what?
It is their words cannot describe how terrible of an idea this is. Like, for two reasons. On a practical level, and I'm sure Nikos can sympathize with this as well. On a practical level, when you walk in, like just very simply, like forgetting anything as it relates to politics and community and culture and all that, as you walk into John Jay Dining Hall at 12 o'clock and you try to find a chair, you will not find a fucking chair anywhere. Like, you have to wait 20 minutes to sit down to eat your lunch. I mean, the dorms are crowded. The bathrooms suck. I mean, we don't have the capacity. Like, there's long ass wait lists for all these classes. We simply just on a practical level, on a more so philosophical level, the rationale that they gave is that they want to build more community and diversity through this. And I tell them that the reason that we're in the situation is, number one, because administration policies and the lack of clarity. And the second reason is that we don't have these spaces for dialogue because we're all siloed off. Like, I'm not saying we're ever going to be like an SEC school where we have sort of the community that they do, but we already have Columbia being as isolated and siloed off as it is, where the athletes do one thing, the finance people do one thing, the C's kids do another thing, right? And if you add more people there, you're just going to dilute the community even further.
Yeah, I mean, look, in principle, I wouldn't have an issue with it if Columbia had all this room to expand and we were somehow going to get more campus added. Sure, that's obviously not a possibility, right? Obviously, that's not going to happen. Like, there's not really any room to grow Columbia. There's not really any plans to grow Columbia. Just physically, there was really not a lot of space. And yeah, I share all of those concerns that Am mentioned as well. But part of this as well is that a lot of people are suggesting that the reason that Columbia wants to do this is because of the way that the Trump administration is trying to reduce the number of international students that are going into American universities. International students obviously tend to pay full tuition. They also pay higher tuition. So this is really a real source of
And they go into more specialized fields, et cetera, et cetera.
So this is obviously a real source of revenue for universities like Columbia and other Ivy League universities as well. Harvard, even more so, I think. That's one that comes to mind. But Columbia obviously has a very big international student body. I do not really have a strong position on this one way or another. But again, I go back to the federal government's role in funding Columbia. Columbia is receiving taxpayer dollars. A part of me is like, okay, I get it, yes. If the number of international students decrease at your university, I understand why you want to somehow make up for it. That being said, you are receiving federal dollars, and it is sort of an expectation that you prioritize American students. So, tough
exactly.
shit. Like, go figure something out
Right.
aside from bringing in like 20% more of the student body.
Yeah.
I also want to say that this is like a lot of things that the administration does, and this is important because this relates to open discourse as well. Like we were in a meeting with people who are very high up in the university sort of government structure, one of like two high level administrators, and when I asked them about their strategy for how to build community, both as it relates to dialogue and more broadly, the phrasing that one of these people use, and I won't use names, is they said they were going to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. That's what they're currently doing. Like, I just want to underline this. Their strategy is that they do not know what they are doing, and that's why what we're doing is so important, because there is no plan on how to build community. It's simply, we're going to try a bunch of consultant driven things, maybe put some nice titles on them, like dialogue across differences or listening tables. And to be clear, listening tables does some good work. But the heart of this is understanding what makes people tick and what makes people really buy into the philosophy of this is these settings where sometimes it's non-political, even, where you can get to sit down with somebody in an intimate, sort of open setting where you get to know the other person, where you get to understand their rationale. And if you admit more students, if you do overly structured dialogue, which a lot of organizations on this campus are doing, no shade to anybody, but if you do that, right, like, you don't achieve what we all want to achieve, which is that you need to get students bought in the philosophy of this. So, like a lot of things with the administration, there's bureaucracy, there's 4-letter acronyms, there's a lot of things that they could do better, but this is something I feel particularly strongly about, because if you admit 20% more students, you are going to end up muddying what it means to be Columbia. And right now they need to give Columbia back that unique identity of truth seeking, of open inquiry. And I just don't see a unified strategy. And so I'm happy to help them on this. Like we are working on this with them. We meet with them every week. So we certainly want them to do that. So this is certainly something that they're going to work on, and we're happy to help them. But right now it's not a coherent strategy.
Yeah, and I really love all of what you said. It's so true. Dynamically, just psychologically, socially. I mean, it's like trying to put out a fire in one of those Tesla fires. You can't. I don't know, like that battery powered fire. It won't go out. And it's there. I did a piece on this, or a video about. No, I didn't do a video. I wrote about this a little bit, about the. How student services and administrative, actually Clay wrote about this first, about administrative services growing in disproportionately to the student body, the needs of the student body, and academics, and paying professors more, and I just feel like Columbia is in frenetic mode, trying so hard to put out a huge fire that is kind of already put out to some degree, but they're just not seeing the people who are willing to be there to, like you guys, to actually build from the ground up again. And Clay, what was that article about that you?
I just wrote about the administrative bloat at Columbia.
Yes.
I think the title was, "Does Columbia Need 5,000 administrators?" And I come to the conclusion that the answer is no. It just, that's one way where they could save a lot of money. Is, I hate to say this, I don't want people to get fired, but it's like you just don't need these admin jobs. More of the control of the university should go to the faculty and the students. And more trust should be put in the faculty and the students.
There's two guiding principles.
That's also complicated a bit, but go ahead.
Like students and faculty also have a little bit of variance, but I think, look, there's two guiding principles, and this is what we tell them sort of in all these meetings and these task forces and all these different like administrators that we've given sort of these suggestions to. There's two guiding principles. There's visibility and there's clarity. So with visibility, right, if people don't know who the administrators are, like they view CSSI and the Office of Institutional Equity, OIE, as these, they call them the shadow KGB. No one knows, no one can put a name to a face. No one can understand what is a policy violation. If you read, and again, I have read hundreds of paragraphs of Columbia policy because CODA even itself was just a nightmare to coordinate.
Again, this is why we have as our president, because he does this shit that absolutely nobody else is willing to do.
Like hundreds of paragraphs.
He'll text me with stuff like this. So he'll just be like, "Oh, so I just read 100 pages," very casually, like you just mentioned there. So like, I just read 100 pages, and this is what we do, and it's like, okay,
and it speaks.
Cool.
And in all seriousness, it speaks to just sort of the stupidity of how we're just trying to get students to talk, and we have to do all this. Imagine what other people who want to do things like research, et cetera, want to do. But anyways, the point is that with visibility, they can't put a name to a face. They don't know who's running these offices. The administration isn't humanized. And with clarity, right, no one knows what is an IRA violation, right? There's not examples. It's double standard is the wording, but whatever that means. No one knows what gets you referred to CSSI and OIE. Student groups like Platypus, even I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but like Platypus, weren't able to hold like a major event until like our event where they co-sponsored it, right? I mean, none of us want to like protest. We're not trying to start anything. We're not trying to break any rules, right? And if we're not being treated sort of with that like good faith acknowledgement, right, then that is indeed sort of the biggest hurdle to open discourse. I mean, we can talk all we want about culture and sort of people not willing to accept different viewpoints, which is really a big problem. I agree, right? But equally so, we have to talk about the structural barriers, and it's because there is so much administrative bloat. And the last thing that I want to put a button on sort of this point is this is not reinventing the wheel. Take a look at Yale and Dartmouth. We're ranked last in the FIRE rankings. Yale was in a similar place as us. In a year, Yale reformed their administrative bloat. Like, I know they had like one administrator for every student or something absurd like that. They cut down like significantly within the course of a year. I mean, Dartmouth did the day after October 7th, did debates between Palestinian and Israeli faculty and students from the different departments. There is a model for this, and Yale moved up 97 slots in the FIRE rankings.
Wow.
Dartmouth's moved up like in a single year. So we're not asking to reinvent the wheel. What CODA is saying is do this in a way that's authentic, student-led, be smart about your bureaucracy, and operate in good faith with the students who want to change this. And if we do that in a single year, they'll be shocked at the amount of change that they can make.
That's brilliant.
Well, I think with that very good advice, that's a good place to end. So I want to thank you both again for coming on the pod, Nikos for the second time, and thank both of you for the good work you're doing at Columbia. I'm so proud of you guys, and I think CODA's great and is going to continue to do great things and become even better. And I'm just super psyched at what you guys are doing, and we'll definitely stay posted to see where that organization goes and where you both go with your careers. So,
of course, and again, we want to thank both of you too, because you really were the masterminds behind this. And I think in every meeting we say this was Clay and Anthony's creation, and so we're really honored that you guys would even consider passing this on to us in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, we had to do this, I think, at some point, just because obviously it would make sense that we discuss code on your guys' podcast.
Can we plug socials and stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh, we're gonna first of all, we will include all that links in the show notes, but feel free to shout it out now.
Yeah, where can we find you? Yeah,
of course. So you guys can find us in a variety of different places. Our Instagram is at Columbia CODA, and then our website is columbiacoda.org. So you can find us there. If you want to contact us via email, we're columbiacoda@gmail.com. Feel free to visit the website, get involved if you're a Columbia student, or even anybody if you have thoughts for us. We'd really appreciate it. I mean, this is a cultural movement that we're trying to build, and it's off to a great start. So the more the merrier, all the help we can get.
Yeah, well, I encourage everyone listening to go check them out and support them in any way that you can. And thanks again for listening, everyone. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank y'all.